Hey. Time for another Out of This World story from rSpace. Some people get on TikTok for recipes, funny clips, and dance trends. This cheater went on the thirst traps, and she stayed thirsty, one drool emoji at a time. Today on rSpace, in the digital age, your mistakes are just a search away. Found my wife flirting on TikTok comments. I found out she was cheating. Now she's homeless and broken. This is probably the stupidest way I could find out my wife doesn't hold our marriage as sacred as she's supposed to. It feels so stupid typing it out because for some reason, I feel like it is somehow an indictment on me. That doesn't make sense, but that's honestly the way that it feels. I'm going to do my best to narrate this in a way that's easy to understand and follow. I am 36 male and my wife, Bobby, is 37 female. We've been married for 10 years now, and we were together for another 5 years before that. We've nearly spent half of our lives with one another, and I think no one should blame me if I was under the assumption that I knew her to the T. She ended up showing me that it's true that you can't trust anyone because this was the one person who I thought I could trust truly. Clearly, it's not the case. I don't know if our story is similar to most other people's, but when TikTok really became popular, we saw it as an immature thing that was meant for the kids. It's not like we were entirely averse to social media because we have Facebook and Instagram accounts like most people on the globe. TikTok just seemed to like it was meant for the younger generation, similar to an app like Snapchat. As you know, at this point, pretty much everyone is on TikTok, even your grandma. So we eventually got onto it and realized that we were so off in our initial assessment of the app. It wasn't all dances and silly trends. I've never really been addicted to my phone. I can do without it for an entire day. However, Bobby isn't quite like that. She's a lot more obsessed with it, and I've had to scold her numerous times when she picks up her phone and to start scrolling through Instagram during our date nights. I've noticed that in recent months, she spends hours on TikTok at a go. I had spoken to her about it, trying to get her to use the phone's features to check her screen time and limit how much time she spends on the app. But it hasn't really worked. She'd watch hundreds of videos and leave comments on almost every other one that she watched. There have been several occasions that a video comes into my FYP after it has been on hers, and I see her comments already there. That was what ended up causing the first major problem that we had, and for me, it was a very significant problem. I was scrolling through the app one night and I came across a video that was for a press tour that a big budget movie was having. The two leading actors were talking with an interviewer, and I was very surprised to see a comment she left under it saying, "I'm married, but I just need one chance," followed by some drooling emojis. There were a few women underneath it replying with silly things like, "Same girl," and the like. I was glad to see that there were a few there who were scolding her and telling her to delete it. I think what made that discovery even more embarrassing was that some comments were talking about how she was making remarks like that when I was right there in her profile picture on TikTok. And I was. I felt like I was so exposed. The annoying part is that I'm certain she got the notifications of the replies to that comment she made, but she didn't think to delete it. Instead, I had to see how my wife was thirsting over men who couldn't even look her way for a moment. I'm not trying to be mean, but I'm realistic enough to know that a Hollywood actress wouldn't look my way, and the same is true for my wife. That doesn't mean I don't think my wife is beautiful. It just felt like such an unnecessary comment to make, because it had no upside at the end of the day, and she knew that at the time that she typed it. Several videos down, I saw an edit that someone made of the actor from that movie, cut together with scenes from the movie's trailer, and then I saw that she had commented the heart eye emoji under that one. The comment didn't get traction, but it was right at the top for me because we're TikTok friends. I decided to confront her about it right away. I asked her why she was making such flirtatious comments on TikTok, and she seemed confused. I told her that I had seen her comments thirsting over an actor, and I could see her remember. But then she looked confused. She asked me if I was joking or not, and I said that I wasn't. She said she couldn't understand why those comments were a big deal. After all, she was obviously joking, and it wasn't as if she'd ever get him. At that point, I couldn't tell if she was joking or not because one of her reasons why her flirtation wasn't a big deal was that the person on the other end was someone she'd never get a chance with. A lot of modern women are delusional regarding their appeal, so the only reason she probably felt like that she'd never get a chance with him was because he was too far away, not because he's a superstar. I told her that she couldn't expect him to believe that. Obviously, I knew that she wouldn't be able to get him, but her comments were expressing the way she really felt about him, and despite the fact that it was utterly disrespectful on its own, it was even more disrespectful because she had even mentioned the fact that she was married and indirectly turned me into a talking point in a TikTok comment section. She scoffed and said a very half-butted apology, which pissed me off. So I decided to keep going. I let her know that she would definitely not feel that way if I had left a comment under a post from Elizabeth DeBecky talking about how I was married, but I'd love a chance. She paused for a second, as if she wanted to refute it and say that she would have been fine with it, but instead, she just repeated that she was sorry, but this time around, it was even more insincere. I decided to leave it at that, but I left the room to go and sleep on the couch. Because I hate prolonged fights, I decided to make up with her the next day. I expressed how little I appreciated her making comments like that. It wasn't because I was insecure or anything, but simply because, as a married man, I expected my wife to be out there knowing that I was the only person that she needed, both physically and emotionally. Her lusting over other men didn't feel good. It was fine to feel that way, but to voice it publicly, that was the height of disrespect. I let her know that there was no point in making those kinds of comments going forward. She said she understood, and we settled things there. Sadly, it was about 3 or 4 weeks after that a friend messaged me and sent me a screenshot of my wife in a reply to one of the comments under a video of some guy cooking shirtless. The original comment was someone commenting about how hot the guy was, obviously. But then Bobby's reply to that was her agreeing, followed by a drooling emoji. The person who sent me that is a very close friend, so I decided to tell him about the entire situation, and he seemed a lot more pissed off than I had been. Though, to be fair, he's been divorced twice, so women are a touchy topic for him. He said that I'd be a fool not to make sure that Bobby wasn't cheating on me. I told him that as much as I was surprised by her flirty comments, I didn't think she was cheating. He told me that I could never know, and he was saying that from experience. His first marriage lasted 11 years before it hit the rocks. Based on that, before I confronted her this time around, I decided to see what I could dig up. Getting her phone was hard because she was pretty much addicted to it, so I waited until she was asleep. The first place I went was to her TikTok DMs. Since she was so addicted to the app, I knew it wouldn't be surprising to see her getting up to no good there. It was worse than I thought it would be. She had sent messages to at least 15 celebrities and TikTok influencers, all male and all very lustful. The first one of those was sent 6 months ago, but she had sent the most recent one about 2 weeks ago. A few of them replied her politely without returning her energy, and most of them were left unreplied. But what really set me off was that one message in her inbox, and this one wasn't from a big TikTok star or anything. She showed that my marriage wasn't going to make it. The guy was a regular guy on TikTok with about 4,000 followers, and from their messages together, it was clear that they had been meeting up and sleeping together. I almost didn't believe it because the way they talked about the things they did was too casual. It almost seemed like it was roleplay, though that wouldn't have made it better. However, once I cross-checked the date when the guy said, "Have you gotten home?" with her gallery app, I found out it was one of the days that she had been eager to do the groceries. She went for groceries, but she also had a picture of a lunch at what seemed to be a chain restaurant and a picture of a hotel hallway. She hadn't told me anything about that. That was all I needed to see to know that my wife was really cheating on me. Honestly, I felt my head begin to spin. I put her phone away first because it really felt unwell, and then I had to go back and grab screenshots because I'd been in a horrible position if I confronted her with all of that. I left the room and went to sit on the couch. I really did feel like I was going to hurl. I couldn't stay beside her and look at her because I was scared of how I'd act around her. I don't know if you understand how painful it is to think that you're with the person that you'll be with for the rest of your life, but then they mess everything up. She couldn't keep her fingers from expressing the lust for men she'll never meet, but even worse was that she couldn't keep her indiscretions virtual. She had to mess everything up in the real world too. The worst part is that she's not even someone who is crazy about the bedroom. I've tried so many times to spice things up and ask her what she wanted to try out, but she never had anything to contribute to the whole situation. The next day, I was out of the house before she came downstairs, and I spent the early morning in a park before rushing over to a divorce lawyer's office. Once I told him the whole situation, he let me know that we'd be getting the divorce process going in a few days. From there, I went to work. When I got home, she could tell that something was off, but I refused to budge and let her know what my big issue was, because I didn't need the drama yet. I wasn't prepared for everything to fall apart. When I had gotten the papers, I steeled myself and dropped the envelope in her lap. She seemed excited initially, but then she actually started reading the contents. Her smile faded from her face. She asked me if I was joking around, but I told her that I wasn't. I wanted a divorce, and I was going to make sure that I got it. There was no way around it at that point. She seemed really confused, and she said that she didn't understand what she had done. "Aren't you happy?" The question set me off, and I let loose on her. I told her that I had been happy, but she had ruined it. Not only did I find out she was still acting like a 20-year-old in the comments on TikTok, even after we had spoken about it, but that she was cheating on me. "What? Cheating? What?" was her immediate response to that. I told her not to play dumb. I told her that I knew all about it, and I mentioned the guy's name so that she wouldn't bother continuing the act she had going. I could notice that her hands had started to shake. She was scared. It was the consequences of her actions catching up with her. I let her know that I'd be kicking her out of the house the day after, so it would be best for her to pack as many of her things as possible and leave. She asked me why there wasn't any room for discussion. I told her that cheating wasn't the kind of marital issue that you could talk over and find common ground for. It was as bad as it could get in a relationship, let alone a marriage. She had ruined it all. I let her know that there wasn't any point trying to change my mind because I was 100% made up. Despite that, she still tried multiple times before I eventually went to bed that night. When I woke up the next day, she was packing some of her things, and that made me glad. I was happy that she could tell that I wasn't joking. Halfway through packing, she paused and asked me if she'd be able to stay there for a bit. I said no. She left several hours later that same day. Just so you know, the divorce process has begun, and as far as I know, Bobby has been bouncing between couches. She's currently at her friend's place, but this is the second person she's crashing with since I kicked her out, so I don't expect it to be the last. I'll be sure to come with an update to this as soon as I have it. Update. Hey everyone, I was here weeks and weeks ago about my wife whose flirty TikTok comments to celebrities and influencers eventually clued me into the fact that she was cheating on me. It was one of the strangest moments in my life because it all happened so fast that it seemed like a blur in my head. I'm glad I wrote my last post because it actually gave me a very solid way to recount everything that happened. We were already in the process of divorcing each other when I posted the past post, but now we finalized it successfully, and I'm so glad. Things went to court, needless to say, because I wanted her to get absolutely nothing from me, and obviously she wasn't going to agree with that. So we tried to settle things for a while, but nothing came out of it, and our case eventually got put in front of a judge. This was the part that surprised me. I've read stories here of how men leave their ex-wives with nothing, so I knew that it could happen, but I genuinely didn't expect that to be the case for me. Thankfully, it all worked out. With the evidence of her flirtation and proof of her actual adultery, it was clear that she had been very calculated about her cheating. If a single one of the guys she had messaged had replied to her, she would have raced to their bed. She hadn't put our marriage on the pinnacle it deserved to be on, and if not for her actions, we would still have been together. Thanks to that, I didn't have to give her anything. We each had our separate bank accounts, though. While I had more saved up, the judge didn't really care too much. I didn't have to worry about alimony, we didn't have vehicles or children, so there was nothing to split there. Our apartment was the big concern, and thankfully for me, it went my way. That's more reason why you should always kick her out, instead of moving out for her. I think that helped a lot in keeping the house. We live in a city that's generally considered to be expensive, and we were paying for the apartment on a dual income. I will still be able to keep it by myself for about a year. Even longer to be honest, but without a pay raise, it'll start to get uncomfortable. However, things will be much harder for her since she's always earned less than I have. In fact, that's been showing in full measure. The divorce process had her max out everybody who was close enough to house her. There were very few options left for her, and I learned that when she called me crying to ask that I let her move back in, she said she'd pay rent, and I told her that there was no offer that would be big enough for me to let her back in. I told her it was over and that if she continued to reach out to me, I'd eventually get a restraining order. I didn't know this at the time, but I eventually learned that she had moved out of our city to live with her sister 2 hours away. At that point, she started making a daily commute to get to and from work. However, it really started to eat at her because after waking up extra early and spending 2 hours on the train, she had to actually use her mind to do work. Once the day was done, she'd have to spend another 2 hours on the train back. I found all of that out when she called me about a month later in tears. She said that she was feeling burned out and that she couldn't keep doing the commute. She begged me again, pleading that I let her get at least a room in the house. She couldn't keep going, and she wouldn't be able to afford a good apartment for herself. I let her know that it was too bad for her, since she had brought it upon herself. At that point, she snapped. She called me all sorts of names. She said that the love I had for her wasn't supposed to have disappeared at that point. She said she still loved me so much, but I treated her as if she were trash. She said that it wasn't going to cost me anything to let her stay in my house, but I was being petty. I told her that I was truly being petty, and I didn't mind it. For one last time, I told her that I didn't need her calling me anymore. Since then, she hasn't called me, which is great. However, I learned through her sister that she had quit her job in our city and was now working in her sister's city in a new job. It wasn't as good, but it saved her the stress of the commute. The problem was that she really liked her old job and now it is gone. That just added a little bit extra to my happiness. She had to have the consequences of her actions served to her nice and hot. So now, my ex-wife, Bobby, doesn't have a permanent home to call her own and just had to quit her favorite job for a job in the city she's hardly familiar with. I know it hurts her so bad, but I have nothing to say to her, since she caused the situation. It makes me happy to know that she got a good reward for her behavior on TikTok and cheating on me with a guy. That's pretty much it. There is no update right now, and I don't see another coming in a long time, if ever. But I'm glad that things worked out in my favor, and not in hers. She had every opportunity to go, okay, I crossed a line. But instead she doubled down until it wasn't just comments anymore. Now, where's she at? Honestly, that's just life giving her the consequences she worked so hard to earn. Couch surfing, losing a job she liked, starting over in a place she doesn't want to be. All of that came directly from her own actions. You didn't ruin her life, she did. You just finally stopped cushioning the fall. At the end of the day, she wanted attention from strangers and the internet more than she wanted a real marriage with you. That's on her. What do you think? And thank you for joining us today on rSpace. Be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on our next video. See you next time.